And welcome to a not so laser focused edition of Ben's Junk, but no less satisfying. So anyway, this video is going to be a bit of an experiment on my part, I guess. I can see this getting a lot of curiosity clicks or being just one of the absolute duds of my catalog, and I can see the content of this going in either extreme direction. But anyway, yeah, we're going to be talking about Laserdiscs today. And what we've got here is the still sealed, so even I don't know what's quite in it, the still sealed mid-1992 edition of the Laser Video File, a catalog of supposedly every Laserdisc that was in print as of the time that this went out, or at least was scheduled for release. And it's appropriate that I have this one because if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong about this, but if I'm not mistaken, Laserdisc hit its peak of acceptance here in America in 1992. If I'm not mistaken, it peaked at being in 2% of American households, which of course is nothing compared to VHS at its peak, which I believe peaked somewhere around the 70 to 75% range. But anyway, yeah, just looking at the cover of this one, I think we're in for some archivisms that are already very much a thing. So I noticed that they apparently have some CDVs in there, the 5-inch CD video titles, which were a normal audio CD, but had part of it that could run a general length music video's worth of uncompressed video footage, a 3 or 4 minute music video, and then could do however many minutes, limited minutes of just audio, normal CD audio. So that'll be interesting to see. And I don't remember seeing those at all at the time, but I did discuss them on the Laserdiscs Volume 2 episode back in 2018, and Techmoan devoted a video to CDV stuff in general, I think the year before. So, the material is out there if you're curious. But anyway, there's some other archivisms going on in here. It's got a thing on karaoke. I don't think we're any stranger to that, even if I haven't done a laser karaoke episode in a very long time now, because I don't like fighting with YouTube over it. And we'll see apparently what the hottest Laserdisc player on the market was in 1992. So with that, I got my Swiss Army knife in tow here. Let's open up this sucker and we'll thumb through and we'll pick out some highlights and we'll talk movies or whatever kind of technical stuff I find in there, whatever happens to catch my attention. And here we are, and it looks like it might have gotten a little water damaged or something at some point. It's probably not even going to show up with my camera, but it's a little discolored. So we'll see. Yeah, the pages are a little, stuck together. This could be interesting. Oh, I see a catalog-y thing here. Subscription offer. So, yeah, they seem pretty confident about it. Kind of asks all the usual questions. How many Laserdiscs per year do you buy? How much money do you make? Blah, 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 blah. And looks like we landed on Westerns here. I don't necessarily associate Laserdiscs and Westerns, but yeah, I don't see why not. Now, whether or not there's anything that really stands out, I'm not really much of a Western aficionado. A lot of the big titles here, Hang 'em High. So let's just, let's start it. Well, we got some ads here, I suppose. MGM Laserdiscs. Let's see if I can't get a little neater shot of this. So MGM had some really nice titles. And at varying points, pretty valuable ones. So one that stands out to me here is It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. And that's one of those movies that had kind of a weird history. It was 3 hours plus initially when it premiered, and then when it went into wide release, it got cut down to something like 2.5. But that 45 minutes worth of footage that got cut out got lost. And as of, I think, 1991 here, they had found like 20 minutes or so worth of it. But that Laserdisc was kind of a big deal, and I own that one, and I've owned a couple copies of it. I found one at a thrift store in Colorado that was in better condition than the one that I had flea-bayed. And there's a definite drop in quality, though, between the main movie and the rediscovered footage. And just some kind of a nice thing here. Kiss is still a Kiss, except on Laserdisc. Oh, yeah. And, of course, MGM had all the Looney Tunes stuff, the Tex Avery collections. And some of those still fetch good money today. The Tex Avery ones definitely do. Let's see here. Proton LD901. I can't say I've ever even heard of that company before. So it looks like it's kind of more of a laser karaoke unit as opposed to a normal Laserdisc movie sort of thing here. The Faruja line doubler. A lot of stuff I've never even heard of in here. Hopefully this will give me some food for thought for future archivisms. Something tells me this is not a product, though. Call it a hunch. Let's see here. Image Laserdisc. Now, their main thing was really more, I guess you could say, special interest. A lot of music stuff, a lot of comedy, some pornography. And I own a bunch of Image stuff. They did most of the silent movie Laserdiscs at the height of its notoriety. It looks like they were doing the authoring for 20th Century Fox and Orion and the D Company as well. And we got a nice big article here, which I'm not even going to try and read. Nice TV there. Big. Remember these? The big rear projection things? Let's see here. We got a Pioneer CLD M90 Laserdisc player and 5 CD changer. My camera work and my hand are probably not going to be all that great. This was one of the first movies I ever owned on Laserdisc, actually, The Addams Family. And I covered this on, I think, the original Format Wars episode, because at the time I thought it had a strange form of laser rot. It just turns out that the Laserdisc player I was using at the time was a little bit miscalibrated, and it was only miscalibrated for this one disc. But I went back and revisited that on the Laserdisc Laser Rot episode a few years back. Discussing widescreen. Yeah. Well, I found the karaoke article, but instead of giving me any real inside baseball on laser karaoke, like what were they smoking, it's kind of almost more like a PR thing. And oh, look how well our bar is doing now that we've got a laser karaoke machine. And indeed, we've got an ad featuring the Animals, vintage footage of the Animals plugging one of the laser karaoke machines. And I can't say I entirely recognize that unit. Strange. Of course, longtime archive viewers probably know that model. I featured that one a bit. So yeah, a little bit disappointing here. When they're talking about dedicated players, I guess they could go up for almost $2,500. They got some reviews in here. I guess some of the Beatles stuff was just dropping at the time. Pioneer Artists. Now, this was a little bit after the Pioneer Artists laser rot issue. A lot of the early Pioneer Artists titles, like 80 to 84, 81 to 84, those can suffer some rot, but I think it was pretty well worked out by this point. Having said that, the Pioneer Artists tag would have been dropped not too long after this. These are kind of some of the last ones, and getting a good look into early 90s here, you know, Jesus Jones, Roxette. Well, they touted there being a list of Laserdiscs that had won Academy Awards being in here, and indeed it's here in order. And I guess the noteworthy one for me, being the silent movie nerd, would be Wings, which won the very first Academy Award. And of course, initially the Academy Awards covered 2 years. It wasn't quite a truly annual thing yet. Now, that movie Wings, Clara Bow, even though she's not really the star of it, she usually gets the name, you know, and all the ties to it. It's worth seeing. It's a sporadically interesting movie, at least. Grand Hotel. Yeah, we're really digging deep here. Grand Hotel from 1932. I love that movie. Greta Garbo, the Barrymore brothers, Lionel and John. Of course, we know a certain Drew Barrymore these days, carrying on the name. Otherwise, nothing that stands out too much. Everything you'd kind of expect. Casablanca, Gone with the Wind, All About Eve. That's a wonderful movie. The Godfather, and it looks like the list ends for 1990. So Dances with Wolves, that doesn't surprise me. Anyway, here's the ballot for Best Laserdisc of 1991 and 2, I guess. I think we kind of missed the vote. It's kind of a shame that it's just impractical for me to scan this. I would scan it, but this is 365 pages. But I just wanted to pick out some stuff that just kind of caught my attention in the comedy section here. This was 1992, but a lot of 80s stuff was still lingering. Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield. Back to the Beach. How about that one? I'm kind of surprised that one, A, made it to Laserdisc, and B, lasted that long. I have 2 copies, actually, of the soundtrack to that thing. And neither on CD. That could have been a really great satire. That they wanted to be meta with it, and they started to be meta. It's a beach movie. It's Frankie and Annette back together, and they have kids now, and it's the kids getting into trouble, and Frankie and Annette having to kind of deal with it. But yeah, it loses what it started out to do. There's a great bit early on with Annette Funicello and a cupboard full of Skippy peanut butter, which is only going to make sense if you know her history of making commercials. Looks like the Back to the Future movies were all out both in pan and scan and Laserdisc widescreen. See what happens when you stick one word in my head. And I'm noticing they're kind of mashing together genres. So yes, this is comedy, but they're also throwing in some, you know, true classics. There's some silence that are lurking in here. I saw the cameraman in here, Buster Keaton, which I've covered on Archive before. The twofer of his last 2 silence, they have mixed in with much more contemporary stuff. And yeah, it's kind of interesting how they broke this down. They got all the Charlie Chaplin stuff right alongside, say, City Slickers, which was, you know, kind of a new thing at the time. So here's just a general comment here. I'm looking at the top right here, the Milky Way with Harold Lloyd. We've discussed so many times on Archive public domain VHS and stuff. Well, there were, of course, public domain Laserdiscs too. And if you look at the price, they're still kind of up there, $24.95 for Harold Lloyd's The Milky Way. But at the same time, in the realm of Laserdisc, you generally did not see the crappy beat-up prints that you could get for $2.99 on VHS. But they did indeed exist, and it's actually kind of a good way if you're into public domain stuff to round it up and have a halfway decent restoration if it hasn't had one, even now. So a lot of stuff from the Black Hawk collection, a lot of Paul Killiam stuff, that sort of thing. So it is out there if you have a love of that stuff. All right, we're up to the horror stuff now, and it looks like all the Friday the 13th movies were very much still in print at the time, which I find kind of amusing, especially the first two, which came out when they were still, within a year or two of their initial release. And those, at least in my collection, have not aged well as far as the discs proper. Now, if you're into the Halloween movies, well, you could only get 4 and 5, if you look at the top of the page there. 1 through 3 were very much out of print in 1992. Now, I've been kind of looking around for more of some of the culty stuff, and it's mixed all over. It doesn't seem to really have its own collection section, as it were. And it is kind of interesting to see what is there, like Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. There's a feel-good movie, if you ever saw one. And I believe it was the Raymond Rohauer episode where I mentioned that movie, and one of the guys, oh no, it was about the collectors, wasn't it? The one about the film collectors. Yeah, after you make 278 regular episodes, it kind of runs together in some spots. I Spit on Your Grave. Ones that in my mind would never have been on Laserdisc at all, or would have been very much out of print by 1992. For me, the main reason to collect Laserdiscs is if you're a music geek like I am, because so many music videos and concerts and stuff have just never been reissued. So in this case, we're kind of running into some stuff that I'm, again, surprised was still in print as of 92, like ABBA in concert. I think this would have been kind of right ahead of their reappraisal. Otherwise, what else have we got here? Allman Brothers, Brothers of the Road, which is from the early 80s, and not exactly the Allmans at their best. It has been on DVD. If you're into prog, we got basically Yes minus Chris Squire, Anderson, Bruford, Wakeman, and how Chris Squire wasn't letting him use the Yes name. The band is back, so one of their reunion shows without Robbie Robertson. I've got the Bangles one, which has been on DVD now. I'm a little surprised the Pat Benatar one would have still been in print by this point. But yeah, usually when we're talking why collect Laserdisc, and well, yeah, there's still stuff that's exclusive to it, but usually it's more thinking of that horror movie where 10 seconds got cut out of it. If I jump back to the horror section while I'm thinking about it, actually, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, where somewhere down the line they lost just say 10 seconds of footage. There we go. Speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, since I was heading there anyway, yeah, 1 and 2 were not available at the time. But for quite a long time, 5 was kind of sought after because it had again, just like 15 seconds or so that got cut out otherwise. Anyway, jumping back to the music section, it wouldn't be Benny Boy without a little Kate Bush, would it? So otherwise, some stuff that I know has never found its way to DVD. I'd love to see The Cutting Edge, the old MTV show, find its way to DVD. Their would-be alternative rock show before 120 Minutes was a thing. And Terrence Trent D'Arby, there's a blast from the past. And I think he's changed his name a couple of times since then. It's if you try and look up his one big hit on YouTube, you might have to do a little cross-referencing. Well, here's a category I've never been able to cover on Archive for copyright reasons, but video image music. Now, this was a whole kind of subgenre at one point where it was more, I guess you could say, interpretive music to whatever footage, be it scenic or what have you. And some of them don't necessarily make sense. For some reason, they have the Mercedes retrospective in there. I mean, it does have music on there, and I have that one, but yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But yeah, having music going with flight, or again, I mentioned kind of travelogues with music, and just them kind of going into some more, I guess you could say, semi-odd conceptual directions. I cannot talk today. Windham Hill had a whole line of things at one point. And here we are in the 8-inchers, which is still very much music. And stuff that, again, I would not expect to have still been in print in 1992, like Kim Carnes. I do have that Kim Carnes one. So it's maybe some of these were technically out of print, but they just hadn't sold out quite yet. But yeah, it's not a very long list. This is most of it here, taking us from the E's all the way up through Whitesnake. And I have never seen that particular Whitesnake one. I do have two of theirs on VHS, though. So here's the 5-inchers, and you'll notice they didn't even bother to put pictures for them. So I guess that tells you what kind of confidence they had in them. And I can't say I've seen too many of these. I've seen Bon Jovi. Techmoan, I think, might have covered the Cameo one, or that might have been an 8-inch one that just called itself CD video. They would just use the name generically. There's lots of normal 12-inch Laserdiscs that say CD video, so they kind of made the name pointless. The only one I own, Randy Newman, which got the video, the Laserdiscs Volume 2 video, temporarily blocked at one point. And yeah, again, it's interesting how old some of these were. Rush, The Big Money, I think that was pushing 10 years old already by that point. The Cameo stuff was several years old by that point. But yeah, they wanted $10 a piece for what was effectively one fairly short music video, and at best 3 cuts from whatever record. Well, I found the section of karaoke, but it doesn't really say what they are specifically, if they're pioneer ones or they're some of the kind of crazier foreign but still NTSC ones. But this is actually most of the list here, and $20 a piece. But at least from the ones that are ringing bells to me, like some of the 60s ones that I've got, $20 a pop. But I am not seeing any of the 8-inch karaoke ones, even necessarily back in that 8-inch section that they had farther back somewhere. So, well, we do have some foreign stuff, but they're not really talking about where they came from. But yeah, if you really wanted Korean songs, for example, well, you know where to go. Now we get into special interests. So this could be where some of the more interesting stuff is hiding. I do have Unknown Chaplain, and that's been on DVD now. Actually, I really should pick up the DVD. It's been cleaned up and fixed up that much more since then. And I have a love-hate relationship with Unknown Chaplain. It's in 3 parts. The first 2 are quite interesting. It's about a bunch of outtakes that were found. And I discussed this to some degree in the Raymond Rohauer episode a few years ago. And the third part is where they really dug into Chaplin's outtakes. And as it turns out, Chaplin was mostly right on the money as to why he threw them out. As it turns out, that third set, which is mostly just straight outtakes or trying to reconstruct bits, it doesn't work too good. Anyway, well, we got to the decline of Western civilization, but only the first one. So only the one about the LA punk movement in the very early 80s, but not the hair metal one from the late 80s. One of my most treasured titles, again, getting into silent nerd mode here, Hollywood, which is a 13-parter on the silent film era. And this has been, I've discussed this a bit on Archive on the first Silent Film Day, Silent Movie Day episode a few years back, and how the man that made it, Kevin Brownlow, wants to reissue it, but even now, even all these years later, he can't. He just cannot clear the rights to some of the clips and stuff, the parts that are still under copyright. And even then, some of the stuff that is public domain, but they were restorations, copyrighted restorations at the time already. But yeah, that's one of my absolute most prized titles. And if you can see the price, if my camera will focus, that retailed for $250 back then. And if you try and fleabay it today, you're lucky to get it for $300. It is that sought after. And since we're talking Kevin Brownlow still here, we got the Buster Keaton documentary, which sold for $60. But I guess that makes sense, because that was in 3 fairly decent length parts. Well, here's a couple that surprised me as still being in print in 1992. The 2 Scream Greats video magazines, the only 2 ever made, from 1986. And we actually covered the first one on the Laserdisc video disc sort of thing, video magazine episode. I do have the second one on Satanism and witchcraft, and I just haven't felt the need to try and cover that one. If I ever do another episode of that ilk, I may have to consider it, but then you're getting into kind of a dangerous area with YouTube and what they will allow, and they just give you crap about it, or they hide your video. Otherwise, well, look at this. This is a deep cut. When comedy was king. So there was the whole line of movies, certainly during the first half of the 60s, where they were just recutting silent movies and making kind of anthology films out of them. And funnily enough, those movies have, in some cases, become the source of material for those titles, because they just became lost at some point. So they've, in some cases, had to cut them out of When Comedy Was King and some of the others. Educational titles here. I think Kid Disc might still have been in print. We've covered that one on Archive before. Let's see here. All sorts of National Geographic. And this would have been around the time Kid Disc got remastered, but I do not see it in here. But there was a Grolier's one, if you remember that company. And then somehow the movie Abraham Lincoln is in there. I think D.W. Griffith's last movie. I guess they're calling that educational. So mixed in with the educational stuff, a video standard, which I have excerpted on Archive far, far too many times, kind of my main go-to test disc, although it's not necessarily my favorite, but it's the most amusing, certainly. And that thing went for $60 back then, but I guess that shouldn't surprise me. Oh, here we are under games. That's where they hid Kid Disc, which had indeed been remastered by that point, and some other ones that have seen some mileage on archive, if you remember the Laserdisc games episode. Okay, because I know somebody is going to ask, yes, they do have adult titles listed in here, but it is just the names and the prices. So don't expect to see any thumbnails in that one. And otherwise, this kind of was interesting to me. Finder's Corner. This is a list of ones that had fallen out of print fairly recently at the time. So that's kind of a nice thing to have in there. And here we go, some stuff that was announced for release and presumably got released. I suppose a web search could find that out pretty easily. Yeah, it looks like there was plenty on deck for later in 1992. And to close things out here, I found their Laserdisc player comparison chart, and we got a whole list of machines that were available at the time. And I was kind of surprised to see that Carver, usually known for amplifiers and stuff, had a Laserdisc player in there. Otherwise, we get into, okay, what are the good ones? Well, yeah, it's going to be Pioneer. But if I look at least by price, disappointingly, there are no specs for any of these. But it looks like the chief was the Pioneer LDS2, which sold for $3,500. I'll have to look that one up. I can't say that rings any bells. But that sounds almost like the audiophile's equivalent of a Laserdisc player. Otherwise, Quasar had a few, or two anyway. RCA, stuff I wouldn't expect. Sony. And yes, they do have a breakdown of what laser karaoke units were available. So if we go to the one that I owned, if memory serves, it was the V820. Call it a hunch. That thing was $1,050 new, right at the tips of my fingers. So yeah, that was kind of a fun, for me at least, spin through. Hopefully you may have to go back and pause the video if I didn't hold it up to the screen long enough. Unfortunately, there's just too much here for me to scan. We got a directory back here. Notes, I suppose, if you wanted to take your own notes. I'd imagine most people just took a highlighter. Yeah, Laserdisc newsletter. Now we're kind of getting into some of the film geek kind of things. The big reel and some of that stuff. The laser scene. Import discs, which I suppose would have meant Japan. But yeah, and then on the back cover, this is what MCA was touting. Fievel Goes West, which I remember. Shout, which I don't remember. And Wes Craven's The People Who Live Under the Stairs, which I kind of half remember. Oh well. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was a nice little change of pace. I'll talk to you again soon.